Good morning, everyone. We have a fantastic panel for you today, as you can see. Joining us today, we have Dr. Tiffany Anderson of the USD 501 Topeka Public Schools, Dr. Randy Watson, the Kansas State Commissioner of Education, Brian Black, Senior Manager of Human Resources for Spirit Aerosystems, and Terrell Davis, Executive Director of Public Affairs for the Wichita Public School District. Myself and each of the panelists, as Chase mentioned, will kick off this discussion with a 3 to 5 minute overview of our experience with business and education and sort of what led us here today. And then we'll move into a series of preset questions for each of our panelists. And of course, we'll wrap it up with some Q&A from the audience. So please be writing your questions down and ready to go at the end. I'm going to kick us off with introductions, though. My name is Tori Peterson, and I'm the founding president of an organization called Aligned. We are a nonprofit coalition of business leaders advocating for education reform and support in the state of Kansas. But before I get into some of the work that we do with Aligned, I want to take a step back and give you some insight into the path that led me here today. I spent the first 10 plus years of my career working in corporate finance and accounting. Loved my career, quite honestly. Traveled the world, did all kinds of things. Fortunately, my husband and I were thrilled to find out we were expecting our first child about 11 years ago. Being by the book parents that we are, we immediately started interviewing childcare centers because I wasn't giving up my career, and neither was he. And we started reading the books every day, etc. I can tell you it was a daunting process. You know, we were looking at needing childcare a year out, and we were told that we would be on waiting lists for up to a year to 18 months to have access to quality childcare. Nevertheless, we put our name on a couple of lists and we plugged along. Elle was born, and I immediately called these centers and said, "She'll be here after maternity leave. Tell us the next steps." Panicked. Both centers said, "Ma'am, honey, we have 6 months out. There are no available slots right now, so you've got to wait a little bit." I was absolutely panicked. I didn't know what to do. There was no way I was leaving my child in the care of someone whom I wasn't comfortable with. That being said, I made a very difficult decision, and I quit my job. I quit my career because I wanted to be home with my child. And the unfortunate reality of that is that we had that option. We had the money. We lived in an urban area where there were a lot of options, and I had that option. And so many Kansas families today struggle with the same issue, and they don't have that option to quit their job. They simply have to go to work knowing they're not quite sure where their child is. About 6 months into my new job as mom, I got the itch. I was feeling the need for some adult interaction. So I started a part-time job supporting a local manufacturing trade association. They hired me to do emails, run their financials, etc. But it was quick and obvious that that's not really what they needed. What they needed was a pipeline into their workforce. What they needed was to fill their high-skill, high-wage jobs in Kansas, and that's not what they were getting out of the education system. Quickly, I dove in, and that's where my parlay into education begins. I started meeting with education leaders, meeting with workforce development leaders, and asking the questions, how do we get kids exposed to high-skilled, high-paying jobs? Whether they need to go to college or whether they need to go to trade school, how do we get them access? And I learned they aren't really getting access. They just don't know about these jobs. During this same time frame, I was introduced to two gentlemen, Tyler Notberg, who's the CEO, fifth generation CEO of U.S. Engineering, and Jonathan Frieden, a third generation business owner of U.S. Toy and Constructive Playthings. Both gentlemen sort of started commiserating about the same issues affecting affecting their industries, and they wanted to do something about it. So in 2011, the three of us launched the Alliance for Childhood Education. We were going to be the business voice supporting education and making a difference in Kansas. Boy, we did not know what we were getting into. We spent a good year, probably all of 2011 and 2012, meeting with education leaders, meeting with business leaders, and meeting with lawmakers to try and understand the challenges affecting this. And I think all of us probably thought it was a simple ask. What we found out is that education is most certainly a cradle-to-career spectrum, and there is no one easy answer. And certainly we learned that learning is far more than a book in a classroom. In that first year, we learned that in the first 5 years of a child's life, 90% of brain growth occurs, yet we were spending less than 10% of our public funds on that spectrum of a child's life. We learned that access to quality childcare affects not only those kids needing that care, but their parents as they struggle to put food on the table. We learned that children who are sick or hungry or abused simply cannot learn, no matter how good their teacher is. And finally, we learned that we can't continue to operate in the silos of business and health and education any longer. We must all work together as a community if we're really going to move the needle for our Kansas kids. So we've put our heads down over the last 6 years, and we've focused on advocacy, working with the State House to remove those barriers, keeping education and business from playing well together. We've also focused on getting more business leaders involved in this conversation. And I can tell you, and you'll hear more, I'm sure, from our panel today, it's very clear that the education system and the leaders we have in place are ready and willing for business leaders to take a seat at the table. And with that, I'll turn it over to Dr. Anderson. You can introduce yourself.
Good morning. I am going to really talk about myself more through the work. You can Google my name and read my bio, but I think the work speaks more for me than anything else. This little 3 to 5 minutes, I'll spend about a minute just giving you context in 3 different areas. This is my 25th year in education, most of which has been as superintendent in Virginia, Missouri, and now in Kansas. I am the first African-American female superintendent in Topeka, Kansas. Thank you. With that background and in staying with this 3 to 5 minute time frame, I will say I don't have the pleasure of being with you the 2 days. I have a board meeting and I think a meeting at 2 or 2:30 with some fast driving. As soon as this is over, I'll be dashing out. But I am now your ally. If you're not someone that's heard me speak somewhere, we've met, feel free to email, call, and please do Twitter on the Topeka Public Schools Twitter as well, and we'll certainly stay connected and engaged through that. My work really as superintendent has really been about transforming communities and really studying the social determinants of health. I have found that if you align what you're doing as it relates to those determinants and ensuring that schools are well aligned, that you can literally change a community and economic outcomes as a result. I'm going to give you some really quick examples about that as well. Having been first a principal in St. Louis City prior to becoming a superintendent, my husband, an OBGYN and robotic surgeon, and I both felt like, okay, we're going to tackle this thing from birth. I would say, baby, we got this thing. Birth through college, we got this thing. And with that thought in mind, we really began looking at prenatal care, poverty. And so as a principal in St. Louis City in my very first couple of years, across the street from Clark School, a student, Rodney McAllister, was mauled to death by dogs overnight. The morning I came in, he's absent. We realized that, had to identify him from the homework in his pocket. And so when I asked parents, why didn't you open the door? And they said, well, Doc, when someone screams, you close the blinds, lock the door. When you hear gunshots, you hide under the bed. It was that reality that if you're driven by fear, you're less likely to help your neighbor. His mother did not know that he hadn't come home when we knocked at the door. She is a crack addict, They had been homeless, a variety of things that fed into this fourth grade student dying in a way that none of us could imagine. At that moment, my career pretty much changed. Although my husband and I knew we were going to change what outcomes looked totally different. We expanded class size, and in exchange of that, we hired our own social worker, our mental health therapist, our counselor. A washer and dryer was put then and has been since then in every school district that I've been in school, so that parents can wash one load of laundry in exchange for 1 hour of volunteerism. GED classes starting then in every district since then are put in so that parents can graduate along with the preschool, 8th grade, and high school graduation. And just a host of things with realizing that you, as the center of the community, can change outcomes. Outcomes from Clark School became Clark Academy, and those changed. I then became superintendent in Virginia shortly thereafter. With Virginia, where I was the first female and African American, they had about 30% poverty, less diversity than certainly St. Louis, and about 80 different languages right next to Virginia Tech. Very similar approach. However, rural poverty, Appalachian poverty is very different than city poverty. So you're talking dirt floors, mobile homes, those kinds of things. Once again, we began partnering with the community across the community. All students began graduating with their high school diploma and their associate's degree at the same time. Again, just really saying, what are the outcomes, what are the needs, and realigning. Home visits were required for every school, so every family that has a kindergartner has home visits, washer and dryers, and all those other pieces. Fast forward now to Kansas. I skipped over St. Louis in the interest of time, but when you ask questions, feel free. Where I was at in St. Louis, it was 100% poverty. We have 100% graduation rate, 89% college going rate. That particular school, when I joined 6 years ago, was prepared to be taken over by the state and was only at that time meeting 30% of its outcomes. Everything that Geoffrey said is true. That's amazing. And actually, when I went to St. Louis, they said, you're from Virginia. You've been in a charter world as well in Kansas City. This stuff doesn't work. It works. Here's the scary part. Around 89, 90, when I was in high school, 32% of the students in public school were on free lunch. It's now 54% of students across the nation in public school are on free lunch. If we keep growing at that rate, this nation truly does have a crisis that we're preparing to face. And so, but if we know what works, so now you have Virginia close the achievement gap, St. Louis close the achievement gap, University Academy in Kansas City Public Schools, please do look it up. 100% graduation and 100% college going rate. That's right in Kansas City. And so this does work, and it changes the outcomes of community. So that's the work thus far. Really quickly, just to close this off, in Topeka, it has been amazing. Last year, if you Google our performance, every level, elementary, middle, and high, increased academically for the first time in 16 years. And that's one of the articles that you'll see. And part of that is really bringing the trauma-informed care, much like we did in St. Louis, to Topeka. Every staff member, custodian, secretary is being trained in trauma-informed practices. The washer-dryer piece is in, the mobile pantries. So everything that we've done in all the other places is being replicated. And there are 3 systems that I learned from Harvard that I implement in every district that I've been in, and it works in a very short period of time. I think that kind of gives the intro to some degree, and I thank you for being here.
You see why I'm such a Dr. Anderson fan. She's doing remarkable things in Topeka, but she's one of a lot of great leaders we have in Kansas doing remarkable things. I'm Randy Watson. I'm the Commissioner of Education, and I'm a lifelong Kansan. Grew up in Southeast Kansas in Coffeyville, and one of those things I didn't know. I grew up in a broken home because I had this great, loving, extended family. But I remember a couple things. I remember my grandmother, who was the matriarch of this loving, extended family, calling us all together one time and saying to the grandkids in particular, you should all go to college, and you should all think about being a teacher because it's an honorable profession. And so, all right, that sounds good. I'll go to Kansas State and I'll be a teacher. That's what I did, and I still think of myself really in that role. I spent a good amount of time up and down 135 of my career. I taught in Andover, and what was then the new Andover High School that they're getting ready to tear down. Does that tell you how old I am? I'm going to tear that down and build a new one. In a little community of Tuscott, Kansas, and north central Kansas. Then went to Concordia and spent some time there as a high school principal, and spent the greater part of my career in McPherson as superintendent of schools and trying to make a change there in that community. I had a really, really good job in a really, really good community in Kansas, and was not looking to make a change. You get to a certain part of your career and you look at your spouse, and I said, Debbie, I think we haven't figured out what we're going to do when we get old. We're going to retire in McPherson. Our kids, are on their own, and it's going to be wonderful. And I'll never forget, I invited a young man to come speak to a group that we called Bullpup Scholars. And we were in the auditorium before anyone got there at McPherson High School. And that young man said to me, you ought to think about being commissioner of Kansas, Andy Tompkins. I'm blaming Andy, if you know Andy. And, a good friend of mine for a long time. And I told him, he'll remember, I said, I watched you do that job, and he was wonderful. There's no way, given the political climate, you've heard all the issues that Kansas has, there's no way you can be successful in that job. I have a great job. We have some things we can get done in McPherson, great staff. And but I thought about it more, and I thought, well, I don't know how much longer I have, just like all of you, before you just say, well, let's turn it over to someone else, and maybe we ought to just think what we can do at a state level. So I spent about 8 months, and I went out and listened to Kansans. We asked three simple questions. If you think of a successful young person living in our state, can you please describe that person in vivid detail? Write out every attribute, characteristic, and skill set you think that person has. After we did that, we asked the people that came to these groups, 20 different locations in Kansas, can you describe what K-12's role is in developing that person, if any? Maybe it's a parent's role in developing that person in vivid detail. What's K-12's role? The third was what's higher ed's role? That information we took back to Kansas State and to our researchers to massage, because it was what Kansas State said was the largest qualitative study ever done in education in Kansas. Well, we found out we didn't have much business participation. So I called the Kansas Chamber of Commerce, said, can you help me engage the business community? And I went back out to 7 different locations, and we engaged mom and pop shops to Spirit and Cerner and everyone in between. We asked the same 3 questions. Between 70 and 80% of the responses, depending on if it was the general public or the business community, said what make up success you cannot measure on a standardized test. And what Kansans clearly told us is that schools were out of balance in simply trying to drill kids in reading and math at the exclusion of other skill sets that make kids successful. Jeff talked about what rich people do. Well, one of the things that very clearly, if you look at poverty, middle class, and upper class, is that what wealthy people understand that connections are vital, right? And social networks are vital. And not teaching that to kids, you can teach them all the math and reading. What you find out, as Jeff found out early on, when they go to college, they collapse. They don't have the social networks to make that happen. And so Kansas said, you've got to put all that together. You've got to rebalance school. We're out of balance. And so the state board took that on and said, we're going to have a really simple vision. We're going to lead the world. And the success, yeah. Well, because I say this everywhere I go. It doesn't do any good to say beat Oklahoma. It's low-hanging fruit. It just is. It's low-hanging fruit, or Missouri, And I love what they're doing. But in the success of each child, and I'll end this because I'm just happy to be here. It never ends. Jeff's comment, it never ends. It never ends. So I think about the kids that I did teach. I still love to call them kids. I think they love it too now because, if you hang out on Facebook, which is for old people, that my kids from Tuscott are in their mid-50s. And my kids from Andover are all turning 50. So they love for me to call them kids. And the kids in Concordia are in their mid to late 40s, and you can keep going. And so I was recently with one of the at-risk kids. You know, we could go through the story. Tiffany kind of described, you know, no father, mother that did not know how to parent. It was really bad. Was in foster care, came back. Anyway, barely graduated high school in Concordia. She is 46 years old. So she's one of these kids that when it was hard to love. I mean, it was even hard to like her, okay? She just was not a happy kid. So we decided every morning, I did, that I'd start off when I saw her, because she came to school every day. Hi, Sunshine, how you doing? So anyway, fast forward, she's 46. I haven't heard from her in years. I get a text. She says, hello, Sunshine. And I'm like, really? That's the most optimistic thing I've ever heard. True story. She said, I want you to come to my graduation. I'm going to be a nurse. She's an LPN. I'm going to be an RN. All right, in May of this year, right? Just last month. Something happened. In April, she didn't pass. She struggled. Collapsed. 46. She's collapsing. So I drove out to where she lived. We're going to have dinner, right? Because it never ends, right? She's 46. She just needed a little support. So what if you graduate a year later? It's not going to matter. It didn't matter when your mom wasn't there, right? So Jeff's right. Yes, birth, it's important. 46, it's important. And so what I really think we're going to be able to do over the next several years as we're going to lead the world in the success of each kid, and the reason we can do it in Kansas, we're all 1 degree separated from each other. We all know each other, right? That's the good and the bad. And so I say this is about the work. We're really about the work. We're really about changing kids' lives, and I look forward to the conversation today. Thanks for being here.
Still morning. Good morning. It is truly an honor to be here. I feel like I'm home. I am so appreciative of the work of the Kansas Health Foundation and the Leadership Center. I'm a very proud Kansas Health Foundation fellow. And I see one of my classmates, Yolanda Camarena, up there, where we met. I think we were class 4 or 5. It was a long time ago. But we learned so much during that time, and the relationships that were connected many years ago. When I first came to Kansas almost 13 years ago, started it through the Kansas Health Foundation on that other side. And I remember Steve, when he was, when you had the vision of all of this, when you guys were just talking about this. So just thank you for all the great work that you do for our state. Because I just think without Kansas Health Foundation, a lot of good things would happen. So I guess I come to this work a little differently. You know, I'm a former fourth grade teacher, high school teacher. They kicked me out of high school. An administrator of alternative school in Oregon. I'm from South Carolina, where I first began my career. And then I was president, many of you know, president and CEO of the Urban League. Geoffrey Canada is my hero. I have just followed him for years. He has been a great colleague to the National Urban League system, an amazing individual. Many of our programs are based on his whole philosophy. And then now Spirit Aerosystems. And so, you know, from being a provider, a teacher, now in corporate America, I think I bring a unique perspective. I appreciate what the two speakers before me said, because it just resonated with me, particularly Dr. Anderson, your story. I could have got up and started cheering. Those of you know me, I get a little excited, but I'm just thrilled. But one of the things I do believe that that we need to do in industry is to listen more. It was interesting when I started working at Spirit Aerosystems that when you work in a corporation, when you walk in the door, there's this assumption that everybody needs to please the industry, that everything needs to be just what Spirit needs. And I've always challenged providers and educators. First of all, you're much smarter than it is. It is much harder, in my opinion, to run a school district than to run an aerospace company. You are brilliant in what you do. And the reason I say that is because you have to accept everything that comes through the door. We get to control our environment and get to pick and choose who work there, but you don't get to do that, Dr. Anderson. Everybody gets served when you come into to your areas. And so I understand that it's very, very, very difficult. So I just want to just say that I think that continue to challenge industry to be more engaged than what we are. I think we sometimes we get busy in the day of the work that we do, but we need to step back and participate if we want to have a employee that meets our requirements and that kind of thing. We have to be an active participant in that. And so let me say what Spirit Aerosystems is doing. We are moving away from the old adopt the school and throw a few dollars here and there and think we done something, but to a model of really engaging and listening to our educational leaders and understanding what they need us to do. Because my days of principal, Terrell, having folks show up wanting to do stuff for you may not be always a good thing. When you don't understand the reading program, you don't understand the curriculum that is in place, and I want to teach them the way I was taught many, many years ago, that don't work. We need to be aligned. We need to understand what needs to happen. So that's my first soapbox. The other soapbox I want to say is that we are at a very critical time when it comes to employment and workforce development needs, particularly for our industry, and I would suspect every other industry that's represented in this room. Talent has become the critical element of success. We can build a building anywhere, we can get materials anywhere, but finding the right talent at the right time has become the biggest challenge I think will be the biggest challenge of the rest of this century. And those communities who can figure that out and have dialogues like this to help companies figure out how are you going to attract and retain the talent you need to deliver the products that you need to deliver to your customers at the right time, at the right quality, are going to win. Bottom line, are going to win. And if companies cannot find that, we will go where we can. So that's the challenge that's before us. And a lot of it is, I appreciate what you said, Dr. Watson, because a lot of it is not just the 3 R's. The 3 R's are important, but a lot of it is the soft skills, to be able to work in teams, to have a global view, to be all inclusive. As you know, Spirit Aerosystems is a global company, and our products go all around the world. Nobody buys a fuselage on Douglas. So we have to we have to have students, employees who understand that you may be interacting with folks in Belgium, all across the world. The competition is just fierce, and so I think the conversation has to be a well-rounded conversation. I think that the academic piece is so critical for us, but part of my role is recruiting. I actually live in Tulsa now, Oklahoma, since you did that shout out to Oklahoma. And I was sent to Oklahoma, but I'm Wichita, Wichita's home. But our challenge in Oklahoma is pipeline and trying to figure out how do we get our employees to be able to collaborate as we grow the business. And so, for us, we are now partnering with schools in a way that we've never done before. We actually have a high school internship program that we're doing now. We used to say we couldn't do that, couldn't have them in the plant, but we can do that now, and we figured that way out. And we're working very closely with the school, and the school is guiding us and helping us understand how to do that. And so I'll end there because I can talk forever. But I just think that the partnerships with industry now, and I just want to, I see lots of my friends in this room, current educators and former educators. I just want to challenge business. We do not have all the answers. You are brilliant, and we need to learn from you and learn how best we can partner with you to deliver. I hate to think of students as a product, but that's your product at the end. They will be able to have whatever opportunities that they decide to do, that they will be very successful in those. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Terrell Davis from the Wichita Public Schools, and I bring you greetings on behalf of our wonderful superintendent, Dr. Alicia Thompson, who could not be here today, but she's an awesome superintendent who's just finishing up her first year. And I want you to please partner with us and business and everyone else in our vision of dream, believe, and achieve. My role and how did I get here, I guess, is I was a teacher, speech and debate teacher and a coach in the Hutchinson Public Schools system, then came here as an assistant principal at West High School, and then was honored to be the principal of Mayberry Cultural and Fine Arts Magnet, as well as Dean Ray Stuckey Middle School, and then Truesdale Middle School. In 2012, when I was named principal of Truesdale, we were the lowest performing school in the state of Kansas, according to the API score. 5 years later, in 2017, we were named Middle School of the Year in the state of Kansas, and I was named Principal of the Year in the state of Kansas. I don't say that to brag on myself, but to brag on our staff. One thing I heard early on is that every single child deserves one rational adult who is irrationally committed to their success. And as a kid, I had a speech impediment, and that rational adult for me was my grandmother. And I can remember being in the 3rd grade and getting in some trouble and her having to go up to school. And I remember coming home, and I knew I was going to get a whooping that day. So I was prepared for the whooping. But instead, she went in her closet, and she told me, she says, go plug up the iron. And I went and plugged the iron up. She comes out of the closet, and she has a dress. She then says, sit down. She starts to iron the dress, and she says, do you want to know what I'm doing? And I said, well, you're ironing a dress. Surely we're going to go to church on Sunday. She says, no. I'm not going to wear this dress any longer to church on Sunday. This is a dress I'm going to wear when you graduate from college. Now, here's this rational adult who just said an irrational statement. I'm a 3rd grader in speech therapy, and I just got in trouble. We're not talking about college here. We're trying to make sure I don't get suspended. But she says, this is the dress I'm going to wear when you graduate from college. That made an imprint on me that my job for the rest of my life was going to be to try to impact the lives of young people. And when we look at Wichita, we've got 50,000 students, 93 schools, 24 magnet schools. Our kids speak 119 different languages. Our graduation rate is 73.9%. All those things to say that some people deem that as we have a lot of kids that are at risk, 78% free and reduced lunch. Our superintendent doesn't use the term at risk. We use the term opportunity. Every single kid, given the supports and high expectations, have the opportunity for greatness. So we no longer say at risk. We believe all of our students can and will achieve greatness. And so we want you to partner with us in the Wichita Public Schools, partner with our wonderful leadership, partner with our wonderful kids, and give our kids a chance to see not only life outside their neighborhood, but life that they've never experienced in their family. And so it's important. I thank our great commissioner, Commissioner Watson, and other superintendents around the state who are caught a hold of his vision for Kansas schools and all of our vision for Kansas schools, because it's not just important for the kid that's in the suburb who has 2 parents and can have a private tutor. It's just as important for the kid who's in the inner city or the kid who lives out on the farm to have the same high expectations and to have the supports in place that that kid can achieve their dreams and their goals. So I thank you for being here. I'm brief. These guys did a great job of setting the stage. Thank you.
Thank you all for your comments today. And that sets the perfect stage for our first question. For Dr. Anderson and Terrell, can you each give us some comments about the districts that you represent and the biggest challenges and strengths that you see in your districts today?
Yes, I'll start. Currently, and as I mentioned, I'm in Topeka Public Schools. We have 14,000 students, 77% free lunch. And in that setting, 600 students that are homeless. And so in that setting, we have the challenge of poverty and rising poverty over the years. However, we also have the issue that many cities have. Generally, if you study history and urban planning, generally there's a divided wall in a city. So you do have an end of Topeka that is middle to upper class, and an end of Topeka, particularly closer to East Topeka, that has a greater concentration of poverty. So the challenge is to ensure that students catch up and that they really have this same running start or can jump the high jump when others have a running start. So in doing that, we really have made a commitment. Our strategic plan was rewritten last year, and part of the strategic plan says that we will eliminate poverty in Topeka. Sounds kind of odd and funny, kind of like that we'll lead the world. But first of all, you put out there what you know that you will do, and then that's the benchmark by which people operate on. And so using that as a benchmark of being able to say we will eliminate poverty means that you have to understand what you might not have lived or walked. If you are someone who's a TV watcher, the TV series Undercover High covered Topeka Public Schools for last year when I first arrived. And so the cable network still has the shows out there, and you will see every day the walk of kind of what that work looks like in a high poverty setting, which is the school that they went into. We've been able to overcome many of those challenges I talked about last year, and this year, once again, elementary and middle school all improved across the board. So what's that about? Last year and again this year, it's about systems. Leaders will come and go. Money will come and go, and programs will come and go. Systems remain. So we're really focused on systems thinking. There are three things that move any school, any class. If you're a teacher in the classroom, if you're a superintendent, if you are a business owner, the same three things work. And I didn't make this up. This is the research from Harvard. They called it at that time a tripod. Relationships, people will work for you if they trust you. Students will work for you if they trust you. They won't if they don't. So we spend a lot of time on building trust, hence the mobile pantries. This year in August, we'll be opening up a hospital in Topeka High. So we literally will have a pediatrician on site. In Jennings, Washington University was our partner. There's a pediatrician on site at that high school. So relationship building. Students, when they're absent, someone asked about truancy with Geoffrey. If you're absent 2 days without parent contact, we do a home visit. That's our rule. We started that 2 years ago. Our attendance rate at every school is above 90%, including our high school, including our alternative school. And so this whole piece of making sure that's in place. The other two pieces, curriculum and pedagogy. If you are a company and you're not in a school system, think of pedagogy as systems of support. If you're in a school system, your teachers. I have the wonderful opportunity of being adjunct for ASCD. So I travel the country and I'm part of a national poverty cadre. We train, we look at systems, we go to places all over the world. And these three things are the three things that really are drivers. So I always look at which one is broken. The curriculum piece, if you're in a school, it's self-explanatory. What resources? If you're in a company and you're not in a school, if you're here working in this health system, what are the resources that you're providing? And money can never be an excuse because you will never have enough. I've never gone to a school district that wasn't in a budget crunch. Okay, so you really have to say, how am I going to leverage the resources? Really quickly, an example of that, one, the partners, the hospitals, the companies in the classroom, but the other way to leverage that piece and to get over some of those challenges, and I always say I love challenges, that's why you have your job. You were made for the problem. Did you know that? That's why you're there. We spend so much time praying away our problems, but that is why you were placed there. And so I look forward to saying, how can we think and change our mindset to overcome some of these problems? So a resource, for example, when I joined Topeka, they had halftime counselors. We already know that you have to have a mental health team in order to address mental health. I already know that we're going to be the first trauma-informed school district in the region. We have 21 NME trainers, neurosequential mental model and education as of 2 years ago. We've gone to the White House for our mental health model. How do we make that happen? Well, a lot of people were retiring. When I first started, we didn't replace any of them. I have one assistant superintendent, myself, someone in finance. We do have a HR team, but in terms of those directors, we saved $600,000. We ended up hiring full-time counselors. Our counseling ratio is below the national average. The national average is 250 to 1. We are probably one of the only districts in the entire state that's at 250 to 1. That's an example of leveraging resources. Now, that's not sustainable. Clearly, as we get more funding, we need to make sure we have enough support, but that's why I wear the tennis shoes, because this is about all of our work. Your job is no longer in finance, just a finance person. Every person in central office is assigned to a student. Part of their evaluation is, does that student graduate, go to college? And then we have a college advocate that we've hired through Title I to track them through college. Do you get what I'm saying? So these are challenges, but they certainly are also, as was so well said, opportunities.
As we look at the Wichita schools, I think one of our strengths is our diversity. The fact that our kids come from diverse backgrounds. We've got kids from all over the country who come here, and sometimes all over the world. And that rich diversity is shared on our campuses, and our kids are better because of that diversity. I think another strength is that our partners in our community. Wichita's done an excellent job of partnering with the Wichita Public Schools, and we want to continue those partnerships as we look to the future. I think a weakness, if you will, is just funding, and that's funding across the state. As we look at all kids and how do we get all kids college and or career ready, the reality is that we need those support staff members there, those additional counselors, those social workers, those school psychologists. We need those individuals there who can help kids not only craft what they're doing today, but also craft a plan for tomorrow and the future. And so we need the funds there. We also have some students who show up at our doors who are behind academically from time to time. And we know already that it takes more money to educate that kid to get them caught up. And we can't just sit there and wish on a star and hope it happens. But we've got to put systems in place that make up the gap, and that takes money to hire the additional reading specialists or the additional math interventions. And so I think that's just a weakness across the state is adequate funding. But again, as the legislators continue to partner with schools, hopefully we'll continue to see that improve, and there will no longer be a weakness.
Thank you both. So to piggyback on that a little bit, and I'll open this up to any of you, who needs to play a bigger role in this conversation? How are we going to break down those silos that we're seeing in the state of Kansas to make these a reality for you all?
Brian Black said it best. He talked about the fact of internships. What if every single corporation, organization had some form of an intern for every single senior in Wichita? That by the time that kid gets to their senior year, they're going to spend 2 or 3 months on some professional internship where they're learning the business. Sometimes we don't create the next executive because the kid didn't know that he could be the next executive. And just having the experience of being there with a Brian Black, so that kid who may have grew up, quote unquote, in the hood can see Brian Black and realize, wow, there's no difference between me and Brian Black. So internships for, I think, all of our kids would be a wonderful experience.
You know, I would say everybody needs to play a better role and a bigger role. Every last person, even if you're doing an amazing job right now, myself included, I wake up every day and say, what can I do more than what I'm doing now? What can I do more than what I was doing yesterday? Everybody went to school. So everybody in the community makes this thing happen. This is collective work. You know, I talked about Topeka High and the hospital that'll open up. That's through a great partner, a hospital partner that'll be able to make sure that they ensure they have a nurse practitioner and pediatrician. At Pine Ridge Preschool in Topeka, and this is before I came, they actually partnered with the Housing Authority and have a preschool right there in the middle of the Housing Authority. This past year, they also opened up a hospital with collaboration from Washburn University. Everybody plays a role. We made a commitment to screen every student for mental health. I'm a strong proponent and advocate of understanding adverse childhood experiences. I speak about ACEs across the country. And so with that screening, the first thing people said is, how in the world are you going to screen 14,000 students? I said, oh, that's easy. That's why we like the challenge. And here's how we're doing it this year. We piloted it last year, and part of it was the home visit piece. But again, with the number of families we have, this year we actually incorporated, we have mental health screening, eye exam questions, all that on your registration form when you register for school. Why in the world don't schools have on there the mental health questions, the ones that aren't too insulting to ask? So you take those adverse childhood experience criteria, we took that down to 4 questions, put that on the registration form. Every parent that registers their child, which they register every year, they'll fill out those questions. So a question might be, have you had a tragic loss in the last year? That's going to red flag you if you say yes to any one of the 4 questions. Suicide is the second leading cause of death in students ages 15 to 24. The third leading cause of death with children ages up to 15 in Kansas. Nationally, it ranks within the top 3. That's a mental health issue. So unless we get our hands around that, and that's not a school thing, a hospital thing, a company thing, that's an everybody thing. So I would say challenge your not only legislators, but those in the community to say, if you went to a school, you know somebody that's in school, what is it that you can do more of tomorrow that you're not doing today? And every year, that's that question.
Yeah, I was going to say ditto to what Dr. Anderson said, but my challenge would be that I do feel everybody has a role, but I feel strongly that you need to partner with the school or the districts in a way and understand how to help. Because sometimes I think that we think we're helping and we may not be helping. Because I've seen situations where even when we thought we were doing something good, and the principal told me, well, that's not actually what we need. We actually need this. And so I just think that, just really understanding what you're doing. I do think there's a role for the faith community, for all different communities. But I think that if we can coordinate what we're doing, it would help better. One of the things that we're doing, that I'm spending time doing right now, that I think is very helpful, is just helping the teachers understand what is Spirit Aerosystems and what we do. Giving teachers tours. We're actually going to do teacher, we don't know what we're going to call it. It's not an internship. It's something we're going to pay them to come and hang out with us during the summer, so that they can take that back, because it will be difficult. I was in the classroom, career day, and it struck me that the teacher was just as engaged as she was. Like, I had no idea. So how can she or he share with the students what this life is like if they have never experienced it? And so we're looking at how do we do that more, Dr. Watson, and Anderson, to allow, before companies I think companies have to rethink how we engage with the community. We create false barriers of why you can't come in and see what we're doing. There's certain things that are proprietary we can't let you see, but there's a lot of it that we can. That's the only way you're gonna get excited about it. We just did a tour we had 200 and some middle schoolers that came through, and at the end of it, they were like, wow, awesome, you guys build airplanes. Like, yeah, we're not Spirit Airlines either. And they realized what we did was cool. And they were like, wait, I want to do this. And so I just think that we have to, industry has to, and I'm not here beating up on industry today, but I'm just being real, because I remember when I first came in and how schools were reaching out to us saying, what can we do to help? And we wouldn't, well, okay, we're busy, we can't do that. But if we're going to be successful, we have got to stop saying we're too busy, Dr. Anderson, that we got too much going on. We've got to engage more and allow schools to come back and forth, because I think it's just amazing to me how that impacted the students. Last year when we did the high school internship program, we were struggling a little bit trying to find people because kids didn't really get who we are. After 1 year of doing that program, I don't know if they were using Twitter, Snapchat, or whatever they were using. This year we were overwhelmed. I probably could have tripled the program this year. Just that one opportunity for those kids to see what we did, what we do. I guess it was a great experience for them. They went and told all their friends and whatever, and when we opened those jobs, day one we had over 400 applicants, young people who actually went online, filled out the application, and submitted it. And we asked, well, how did you know? What made you do it? Oh, well, my friend worked there last, or I heard about it, or I saw it on Twitter or whatever. So I just believe, as you said, the opportunities. If we give our young people opportunities, if we hold them accountable to a high standard as a collective community, they will rise to the occasion.
It's great. And I think that the program that you alluded to before with bringing teachers in for the summer is what they're collectively calling externships. So if there are business leaders who want to know how to do that, call Brian.
I'll get the vocabulary. All right.
Yeah. Call Brian and he can tell you how to do that. So perfect. One of the conversations that comes up across the state is that students aren't graduating with the skills they need to impact their career readiness, and then, of course, their impact on their community. Dr. Anderson, can you elaborate on what you heard around the state and what you're doing as programs are beginning to work around career impact readiness?
Perhaps I'll start and maybe turn it over to Dr. Watson. I know that's the college and career focus, really, I would say almost probably for every school district in Kansas, but I can talk about what we do in Topeka. And the difference between the focus for us and from what Geoffrey talked about, we believe in college and career. And so we are preparing our students to make sure that they graduate, they go into college and career. I always tell the kids, nobody's sitting on their mama's front porch. Okay, so let's start with that in mind. Everyone, I don't care when you came into Topeka, like Highland Park High has 30 new students every month. That's the mobility factor. 30 new students every month, but it is not okay to say, this is a senior that started in February and they're not going to graduate. Okay, well, let's look at how do we make sure. Now, when they graduate may be a little bit of a question, but we must make sure that every student, it's an economic issue, plain and simple. And even when I talk to communities, it's an economic issue. So one of the items that we are actually spearheading this upcoming year, it's a model that I've done in the last 3 districts. This will be the first year for Topeka. A college prep academy, we actually do close the gap by extending the time of the school day. Students have to wear business attire. They're exposed to academic curriculum 2 grade levels above, because we know they come in behind and we know they might leave at the end of the month or the year. And so that college prep academy is how the last 2 districts really accelerated what we're doing. And we teach the soft skills. Literally teaching public speaking, videotaping you speaking to a group, teaching how a handshake, eye contact. Every place that I go, I take students with me. They have to wear their business attire. Before we walk into the room, I always say, okay, here are the groups that you're going to talk to. They literally will come up. It's part of their assignment, and to connect with people. So getting young people ready for the workforce in part deals a whole lot with resume writing, speaking, and all of those pieces, in addition to the academic skills. We've pushed in college courses. So when I started, I think the largest amount may have been at Topeka West with maybe 15 or 18 credits offered. The lowest was at Highland Park High with 3 credits offered. As of this upcoming year, Topeka West will be offering 60 college credit hours, because we're telling students you can get 30 to 60 hours or an associate's degree. So that will start this year in Topeka. So this idea of aligning schools with college and careers and ensuring that not only they graduate, but you're tracking them through college, that's the real success, or you're tracking them through their career, is essential. We also believe in placing students. So we do believe that there are some students that, they want to be a particular career that might not require the college degree. And so our goal is to make sure they have the internship early, they're placed, and that we're matched up. For those that want to invest in college prep, this is my little commercial. We need 40 uniforms. And so hopefully, there are more than 40 people here, and uniforms are like $20. So we'll be on that summer saying, okay, how are we going to raise 40 uniforms for our first group of 40 college prep students? And then the college prep students in Jennings, some of whom, one's going to Harvard, it's amazing. These are 100% poverty kids, first generation. They're actually coming to Topeka this summer to train the incoming college prep students. So that's part of how we do that piece. In terms of other schools in the state of Kansas, I'll turn it over to Dr. Watson if there's anything you want to add to that. Don't you like how I just took what you just asked and gave the question to someone
That was
else?
perfect.
I want you to think about this. How many of you went to a Kansas school? Okay. So I'm going to guess. Well, I think I know. There's only been 2 models of school in the history of Kansas from the time we started as a territory. First one was called a one-room schoolhouse. We had tens of thousands of those in Kansas. Well up into the 1960s. The last round of forced consolidation happened in the mid-1960s when we reduced and closed most of the one-room schoolhouses. They disappeared for the most part in the early 1980s, but you can still see them. But I want you to think about the structure of education in the one-room schoolhouse. All right? How many teachers? How many grades? Not all. 1 to 8. We didn't have kindergarten. And most students in that era did not go to high school. 100 years ago in Kansas, 20% Kansans went to high school. Why? Didn't need to. Did not need to. All right? Here's what's changed. In our state, this is the job market. This is what Brian's talking about, the skill gap. 70 to 75% of our jobs require 2 pieces of paper to be held by a student. A high school diploma and something else. Now here's where Jeff and I disagree. I think it is a noble profession to be a plumber, an electrician, and climb a pole and run lines for, wind energy. In fact, I will tell you, 52% of those jobs in Kansas out-earn a baccalaureate degree. Okay? That's a culture shift, though, because I do agree with him that most of us don't want our kids to go do that. That is a huge problem in St. John, Kansas, and everywhere else. Because, by the way, I had this happen 2 summers ago, 4th of July. 4th of July weekend, my air conditioner breaks down. So you know what I did? Well, go to the breaker, go check it's running, but nothing's cold coming out. So I called my friend in McPherson, right? Had all his kids in school, right? Wife answers the phone, says, John, it's Randy. It's on the phone. His air conditioning's not working. So he gets on and he goes, Randy, it's 4th of July weekend. I said, I know my air conditioning. I was like, 110. He said, do you know how much this is going to cost you? Right? A lot more than I was making. He was making. So we need all that. We need to find kids' passion. Here's the issue, though. So that was the one-room schoolhouse. The other model we still are in. It's age-based, it's content-based, and it's time-based. Let me give you an example. I can walk into any school, elementary school in Kansas, and go into a 3rd grade classroom. That's an organizational model created in an industrial age society. That model says all 8-year-olds are going to go to 3rd grade, and they're going to be there, as Jeff talked about, 180 days, about 6.5 hours a day, so that every kid can go harvest in the summer. That's a disaster. All right, the model, now that's not a teacher problem, that's an organizational problem. I can go into any high school, go into a freshman English class. Who goes to freshman English? Freshmen and sophomores that fail it. What do they study? English only, right? I want to be a diesel mechanic. I want to go work on airplanes. Now we're going to study Shakespeare today because that's what you need. We have to rethink that, and I'm not opposed. We need every kid to have another piece of paper, an associate degree, a baccalaureate, master's, PhD. We have 44% of those kids that start as freshmen in high school, whether it's at Topeka High or Wichita West, anywhere in our state, as a freshman in high school, 2 years out of high school, have another piece of paper plus the high school graduation, or are still in pursuit of that. That's a 30% gap, which is the skills gap, Tori. That's why businesses tell educators, we can't find people. And we're like, we don't get it. We've got to shrink that gap in a hurry. And we do that by helping kids find their passion, all the things that Jeff talked about and these guys are talking about. That's how we're going to do it. But you have to help us change it. Whether you're a parent, whether you're a business leader, whether you're an educator, you have to demand that we change the structure of education so that it looks more like what it is to live in 2018 and work and live in 2018, not what it looks like in 1950, because we don't live in 1950 anymore. That's really, really hard. We've only had 2 systems since Kansas was a territory. Now we're trying to create a 3rd, and we need your help. I'm going to end with this. Here's another example. You ever known an Eagle Scout? Anyone ever known an Eagle Scout?
My nephew.
There you go. All right. You know, when Forbes ran a survey of the Fortune 500 companies, this now is probably 6-7 years ago, and gave a list of like 250 things on a resume. All the things. I graduated from Harvard. I have a 4.0 GPA. I volunteered in my community. What are those things that you most look for? What the number one thing Fortune 500 company CEO said? Being an Eagle Scout was number one.
Absolutely.
All right? Because it said something. You get 0 credit for being an Eagle Scout in any Kansas high school today. That should change. We have some teachers experimenting with the badge system, that the standards of which you can be an Eagle Scout, you can get credit for. How about a kid that goes right now in the summer, they're at a church mission trip in Guatemala building shelters. Is that valuable? How about that was part of the extension of someone's career experiences? And we link that back to how we think about school. We have to think about school not in this little silo of school, in the community by which we live, in the state by which we live. And that's why, as Brian said, that's not about business coming in and having a piece of cookie, right, and a cake and saying, here's a couple $100, thanks for our time. No. We need internships. We need job shadowing. We need churches. We need parents. We need Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts, Junior Achievement 4-H. We need everyone to think about what is it going to take to extend the learning and then coordinate those things together.
Awesome, thank you. realizing that we stand between you and lunch today. We have about 5 minutes, so I want to take a few minutes. We'll pass the mics around, and I'll ask each of you to stand, give your organization, and then let us know which panelist you're directing your question to.
Hello, my name is Irene Caudillo. I am president and CEO of El Centro, a nonprofit in Wyandotte, it serves Wyandotte and Johnson counties. I guess for particularly the school districts and the commissioner, most important, one of the professions that is lacking in growth is the teaching profession, particularly amongst those of color, people of color. So when I think about the importance of the growing people of color in Kansas, that means you're seeing more and more in your seats, and you said it very well with the number of languages. I guess I'm wondering how important or what are you doing to really kind of help build those that look like me or look like those that are in your seats in your classrooms? How important is that to you, and what should we be doing more of in regard to that?
And normally I walk around sitting like this, but so that, Irene, I'm not speaking this way and not acknowledging you, I'll just back up a little bit and hold the microphone. So a couple of things. One of the things I will tell you that I believe, you don't have to look like me to be for me, although it is helpful for people to see models of success all over. Just the fact that I am the first female African-American superintendent, you cannot imagine what that says to churches, the community, and other folks. The fact that we have a Latino mayor now lets people know what's possible. So I think that's an important piece. But for us, really we look at content skill in those three particular areas. I'm gonna tell you some creative things with teachers that could be done that isn't normally done in school districts. I don't know why, but we have this paradigm about and this belief about how do you operate schools, even down to parent conferences. Why are they through the day and not on Saturday and in the evening when parents are available? So just these odd beliefs about how you function traditionally. And so when you can move outside of that box and think creatively, I'm going to give you a few creative tips. I won't give you them all because I don't want you to take my teachers. I'd rather take yours in Wichita's. And so with that.
I heard that.
And so with that in mind, I'll give you a few of those tips, but then I'll also kind of share with you just some harsh realities. One harsh reality on data, I love data, is that Kansas ranks 45 out of 50 states in terms of paying teachers. If I go across the line, in Jennings School District, for example, one of the first things we did, we looked around and said, okay, we're 100% poverty. We want the best and the brightest. Who's the highest paying district? What's the most affluent, highest paying districts? We're not gonna pay more than that. So in Jennings, if you work there for 20 years, you make $80,000, $90,000. That is not the case in Kansas. And so Kansas, again, that means I have to recruit from 5 other states who pay, if it really is a salary poverty issue. If you're a mom and you have 4 kids and you're a single mom and you want to be a teacher, well, then that really makes a hard decision about where are you going to teach. And you may or may not come to Kansas. So Kansas loses a lot of teachers to other states because of that. So that is an issue. If you're in Shawnee County, Topeka Public Schools is the highest paying district in Shawnee County, but also we have the highest challenges in our regional area. So that still needs to be far greater than where we are. So that's one piece that you might not have known. We rank 45 out of 50 states. The other piece that I'll tell you in terms of creatively looking for teachers, when we have teachers of the year or teachers that are given awards, you know what? Relationships, pedagogy, curriculum, right? Relationship piece. I write them a letter, I email them. I hope they don't like their principal or their superintendent so that they come and work for me. And often that does work for some people, okay? So some of our new teachers, we get 200 new teachers a year. Some of our new teachers really was just, hey, and honestly, and if they don't come to work for me and they love their principal or their superintendent, I think that's great. My question is, I wanna know what you're doing. Hey, can you come to talk to some teachers? Can you be in our Teacher Leadership Academy? Can I just have lunch with you and pick your brain? See, I'm a teacher. My title says superintendent, but at the end of the day, I'm a teacher. And all of you are teachers. You're a blessing and a lesson every day. What are you teaching the people that are in front of you? And so that's one piece. The other piece is just making sure that the great teachers, we ask every great teacher, invite someone to come and visit. So we do an Educators Institute. I'm sure we're probably the only one again in our region. Our next one will be in October. John Hattie actually will be coming and speaking in Topeka. And while we're there, we're inviting other districts to come. We will only have, well, there are only 50 seats left now. But with that in mind, we ask people, invite a great teacher to that session. we're going to hold, there are only 50 seats left because we're holding seats for great teachers around the state that our teachers are inviting to come and learn and grow and develop and maybe joining us. So our staff of color has increased significantly with some of those strategies. And then we give hiring fairs on Saturdays, at churches. Again, just thinking throughout the traditional model, that makes a difference. This traditional model of how people show up is no longer how things work. That's just a few of those items. So I think it's an important piece to make sure that you're growing that diversity within. But let's say if you don't have people of color, I still think, at least in Topeka, everybody should know how to speak Spanish. And so we started giving Spanish classes last year and said, okay, if you're new, you're gonna leave here bilingual. If you go move somewhere else later, we wanna make sure that you're shored up with how do you have cultural competency. Don't be colorblind, be color conscious when you walk in a room.
In Wichita, we have the Grow Your Own Teacher program where we're identifying paraprofessionals who can go into the education field. We're also going down even below that and looking at our high school students and even middle school students who kind of have that je ne sais quoi, if you will, for education, and really expanding our CTE pathway for education and getting those kids into that program, as well as partnering with local colleges and universities so those kids are earning credits even while they're in high school. We are bombarding all of our colleges and universities, not just our quote-unquote major state schools, but all of our private schools as well, making sure that they're hearing the Wichita story as early as October. And so we're on their campuses, and then we follow back up again in February so they can understand that we want them in the Wichita Public Schools. And so identifying that young talent, bringing them in the summertime so that they can be a part of our staff, whether it be as a tutor or working with kids in the summertime, but also giving our teachers a chance to recruit. The biggest recruiter or detriment to education is teachers. How do we talk about our own profession? Kids don't want to become teachers because teachers are telling them not to become teachers. And so making sure that we're building morale with our own staff, that they understand that Wichita is a great place to work at. And we don't necessarily want to steal the teachers of Topeka. We want them to be there because they've got a great work there. But if they want to come to Wichita, we are hiring.
Wonderful.
So
Thank you so much.
Real quick, Tori, I just want to say about a program that, again, we're trying to think differently. So in the western part of our state, we really have, it's really hard to attract students to be teachers and teachers of color. One of the things that we found in the Dodge City, Garden City liberal area, which is a growing area in Kansas, is that there are, within the Hispanic population, there are a lot of people that want to do something else. So we're taking paraprofessionals, those are people that help in the classroom, and we're providing them a way to move into the teaching classroom in 2 years. Wichita State, Fort Hays State are leading that effort. And we keep paying them, and they do not have to leave their community. That's really important. We have almost 400 people in that pipeline, and we just started that a year ago. So that's really critical because they get to stay in Dodge City. They're going to move from an hourly wage that is not sustainable, really, to raise a family, to move into teaching. And they never have to leave their community. They can give back. So that's one of the things we're doing.
Excellent. Thank you all. And let's give a big round of applause for our panelists today.